everybody, this is Chris Phillips here of the Replacement Level Podcast, breaking in for your daily baseball update, if you will. We've got something big to talk about, and that is going to be Seattle Mariners starting pitcher George Kirby. If you haven't heard, he had some interesting post-game comments after his loss yesterday when he faced off against Tampa Bay Rays in Tampa Bay. In that game, he went 6 1/3 innings and was looking pretty good until he went back out for that 7th inning, where he ended up getting crunched, gave up a 2-run home run that basically tied up the game and kind of brought Tampa Bay back into contention, that which they eventually went on to win 7-4. After the game, this is where Kirby let everybody know how exactly he felt about that performance, where he said he wished he had not been out there in the 7th inning. I don't know about you, but as a baseball player, as a competitor, somebody who likes to go out and give his all, and can easily say that when he competes, he's got one speed, and that is 100% all the time. It's very interesting that he would say that. Now, at first, there's going to be a lot of people out there that are going to say, like, oh, what kind of competitor is this? Like, this dude shows what his mental makeup is and how he's not a good teammate and how this is a bad look and yada, yada, yada. And you know what? They're right. There really is. This is not good for George to say. This is not good at all. The other side, though, George knows himself probably better than anybody else out there. And I won't say probably, he does know himself better than anybody else out there. And there's quite the possibility that he knew he was done prior to going out in the 7th inning. If you know that you're done, you know it's not going to be good if you go out there and you're trying to give more than what you have. So that could be that. We'll go back into that here in a little bit. But going back to George's comments there, it's very not good timing to hear from him. You have the Seattle Mariners who are in a postseason fight with the Houston Astros and the Texas Rangers, because Seattle is currently battling those two teams to win the AL West, which they have a shot to do. Or at the very least, they could make the wild card and still be in the playoffs, which would be for the 2nd consecutive season in a row. And considering the organization was recently just coming off a 21-year drought of not making the playoffs, it'd be very great to have back-to-back seasons for the fan base there. But this is not good. This is kind of a big distraction, because now you have a lot of people talking about it. You have a lot of people talking about him, questioning him. And it also doesn't necessarily look great that he's kind of throwing, or I should say, that he's throwing his skipper, his manager, under the bus here, basically saying it's manager Scott Servais' fault that he went out there in the 7th inning, and it's Scott's fault that he gave up that home run. It's Scott's fault that he threw that pitch that was then deposited in the outfield bleachers. That it's Scott's fault that they lost this game because George went out there and coughed up the lead. Now, we're going to examine this. George had a very disastrous first inning. I believe he went for 30-plus pitches in that first inning. After that, he settled down. He was around, single digits to low double digits for the remainder of his 5-plus innings there, and was kind of on a roll. We're getting into the later part of the season. Everybody is tired. Everybody's had a lot of work on their plate. Everybody could use an extra day off or two here and there. George is no different. I'm sure George would love to have an extra day off to rest his arm. I'm sure the bullpen would love an extra day off to rest their arm. And as the manager, you've kind of got to do some balancing there between the two. You'd love to have your starting pitcher go deep into a game so that way you can save a bunch of your bullpen arms. And on the flip side, you'd like to be able to have your bullpen fresh so that way if your pitcher goes shorter than expected or is gassed, you can turn to them and they can come in and close out the game and get the job done. This time of year, though, we're running into situations where everybody's tired. Everybody has a right to get an extra day off. Everybody has a legit case to get that extra day off. Somebody's going to have to step up and kind of just suck it up and more or less take one for the team and go and do what needs to be done. Scott apparently decided that it was George's turn here to kind of roll through it. And let's be honest, George was rolling at the time. He was cruising through the batting order, minimal pitches for each inning, getting outs. And he's facing the 7, 8, and 9 hitters when this disaster happens. So there's a lot of things that would go into play that you could say, yeah, if I'm the manager, I'm going to go with my starter. He's cruising. He's rolling. He's, under 100 pitches at the time. And why not? We got the weakest part of the lineup for Tampa Bay coming up. I'm going to roll the dice with this. Absolutely. There's the other side. You could say, what the weakest part of the lineup. Let's go ahead and put a bullpen guy in there. Just end it real quick. It's going to be up to your thoughts, your feelings on the game, which way you would rather have gone if you were in Scott's shoes. What we do know is that George was a guy who went through, and George gave it up. George ended up finishing the outing with 102 pitches, which is only the second most he's thrown this season. He had a 103 pitch game back on August 12th against Baltimore. It ended up being not a complete game for him, where he went 9 innings and threw 103 pitches. So if you're going to say that he was taxed because he went for 100 pitches, this isn't the first time that he's done this season. This certainly isn't the most pitches he's thrown this season either, in one game, that is. So he's done it before. He's kind of the workhorse, if you will, in this situation here for the Seattle Mariners starting rotation. Like I said, this is the 5th time he's gone through 100 pitches on the year. So it's not terrible. He threw 69 strikes. He got 14 strikes looking in there, 13 fly balls, 5 ground balls, and 6 strikeouts while going 6 innings. Only 2 walks. He did give up those 4 earned runs, which, like I said, it ended up costing him the win, and eventually it cost the Mariners the game. But it's not a good look. It's just not a good look. And I know from talking with some fans of the team, it's really turned them off on their viewpoint of George Kirby and how they feel about him. And not to mention that it's also not a good look for him and the organization right now, considering everything should be focused about your team's success and heading into the playoffs. And instead, you've got this little side piece here with George making these comments, and there's probably some behind the scenes fireworks, festivities, if you will, that have happened because of this, as a result of it, where, I'm sure Scott talked to George afterwards and kind of maybe put him in his place. I'm sure George had something to say as well. The one thing I will say, and this is possibly the only thing that could potentially save George from everybody getting on his case, like social media has already done, is if George went to Scott prior to going out in the 7th inning and said, "Scott, I'm done. I've got nothing left. I gave you 6 innings. I'm sorry I can't go longer. I know we want to save the bullpen a little bit, but I'm done. There's nothing more I can do. We need to go to the bullpen." And Scott more or less came back and said, "You're going back out there." If that's the case, and we may not know that for some time here, if that's the case, then that shines a totally different light on George's comments and on that situation. Let's not forget, another part of this post-game press conference from George was that he said he would have a conversation with Scott. Not too often you hear players saying, "I'm going to have a chat with my boss," basically. So not to mention, like, what is George going to say? Like, "Hey, Scott, you're fired. You need to do a better job, whatever." The player's the player. The manager's the guy who makes the decisions, and the players have to go ahead and execute what the manager wants, unless there's going to be a big-time revolt, which I don't think there's going to be happening here with the Seattle Mariners clubhouse. Although, maybe this is the peak of the iceberg of where we're seeing that maybe Scott is potentially losing this locker room. I don't know. That's just a little speculation, something I thought that I have as well. There's nothing that I have to back that up or anything like that. But, it is interesting that George would say, "I'm going to have a conversation with Scott later on." That's coming. And then, you kind of think about, like, what's he going to say? Now, the only thing, like I said, if George had told Scott that he was done, and now George is after the game saying we're going to have a conversation, maybe that is why he's saying we're having a conversation, because he's going back to Scott and say, "Scott, I told you I was done. Now we lost the game. I'm incredibly frustrated that we lost the game, and we shouldn't have lost the game considering I told you I was done. We had a lead. We have one of the better bullpens in baseball. Let's turn it to them, and let's have them close it out." Yeah, again, that can make a lot more sense, shine a different light on this entire situation. And like I said, maybe this is the beginning of where we're seeing that Scott is losing the locker room because of some of his managerial decisions. Let's not forget, last season in the postseason against the Houston Astros, Yordan Alvarez is up and he crushes left-handed pitchers. Who does Scott bring in to face Yordan when the game is close? Lefty, starter, Robbie Ray. Yordan deposits the fastball into the bleachers. Houston goes on to win that game and win the series. Why? Why are you bringing in a lefty to face a lefty when the lefty has good success against a lefty? I don't know. And Scott has done that again this year already too, with Jordan going with another lefty as well. So I don't have any concrete information or any evidence that Scott is losing the locker room, but if we start adding some things up, some of his managerial decisions, maybe this is why George is saying, hey, we're going to have a conversation. I don't know. But it is interesting that they would say that. Some good news is that George came out today and he did apologize for his comments. He did say that that's uncharacteristic of him. He's sorry he said it. Scott also said, if a player does something to hurt themselves, that's one thing. If they do something that hurts the team, that's another thing. And you could say that this is something that hurts the team because, again, it is a distraction. Now everybody on the roster has to talk about the George Kirby comments and what they feel of him, and does this, change their opinion of George or anything like that. Scott also mentioned George is 22 years old. Have we not all said or done something dumb when we're 22 years old? Yeah, we have. I can guarantee you I have. I can think of several things off the top of my head that I've done that was dumb when I was younger. But if George is really frustrated about this whole situation, he definitely should have kept this behind closed doors and shared it with just Scott, not gone public about it in this situation when it happened. But here we are. And so now I've seen a lot of people talking about how Scott needs to skip his next start or send George down to AAA and whatnot. And the fact of the matter is, that's just not going to happen. George is a very important piece to this starting rotation. Again, this is one of the best rotations in Major League Baseball. You're not going to send him down to AAA. Can you send some sort of message to him to let him know, we're not going to do this? Yeah, you can. Could you skip his start? Yes, but if you're going to skip his start, that means there's more work for somebody else. And again, as we talked about previously, everybody's tired. So if I'm a guy that's going to pitch after George, and now I have to pitch again because George is getting a break, it seems like it's kind of benefit George in the long run. He's like, hey, I get my extra break that I wanted. Cool. And everyone else is like, hey, man, you got your extra break, but now I got to work extra day because of you. Not cool. I'm not sure what could be done. Maybe you fine him. But again, that based on Scott's comments, if you fine him, that could just kind of fan the flames and exacerbate the problem entirely. I don't know. I'm sure there's something that's going to be taken care of with George, whether it's other players or whether it's other coaches or management or, Scott Servais himself. I'm sure they will address this situation and get it taken care of. Like we saw on George Kirby's PR turn this morning that he's sorry for it. And duh. I mean, we all know you are. We know that since then you've had over, close to 24 hours to hear what social media, what the fans, what everybody else in the media has said, what former players on social media have said. And yeah, you messed up, George. You messed up big time. And so the only thing you can do in this situation is come back and give a heartfelt apology of, this is not me. I'm so sorry. This will never happen again. Blah, blah, blah. We've heard it all before. Whatever. It's words. I don't care about this entire situation altogether. George said something. It was dumb. We move on. I just want to talk about baseball. I just want to watch great baseball. I don't want to hear stupid stuff from dumb players like George Kirby out here saying this after the post game and having to talk about it, because this is... we have a playoff race here. I want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about George Kirby making a dumb, heated, in the moment, frustrated comment. We've all said and done stuff like that, so whatever, let's move on. But nonetheless, George, if you check this out, hit me up on social media. Fans, hit me up on social media. You can find me on X at C_Phillips_13. Check us out, the Replacement Level Podcast, on social media such as X. You can find us on Spotify. You can find us on YouTube channel. YouTube. You can find us on Apple Podcasts as well. Give us your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. Again, tell us what you think about George. Tell George what you think about him. Everybody, this is... interesting day for sure. Right now, as we're looking at the games going on right now, Seattle's actually beating Tampa Bay, and hopefully they can hold on to the win, considering it's a bullpen game for the Seattle Mariners. And hopefully the pitchers after the game will say something to the effect of, I'm glad I was able to be out there and help my team win, and sort of just stick it to George, letting him know that he messed up and he's really got to go out there and prove his words to be the actual truth and that he's going to back it up. So, fans, let's hear from you. Chat with us. And then until next time, guys, enjoy some playoff baseball. And let's see what George does in his next start. See you, everybody.